Okay, all right. Hello. So, I did a texturing workshop yesterday, but I wasn't able to record it. So now I'm gonna give you a shorter texturing workshop just on props, not on buildings, and just take you through how you can make a stylized effect using only base color, which is kind of something we can go for with our stylized look. Now, first thing you want to do, you want to load in the model like this. If you're making small assets like this, usually you're probably going to have more than just one, and it's probably going to be on like several assets at the same time. They'll be smaller on the UV sheet just to save space. But for this example, we'll have one asset on one thing by itself. So let's get started. So first thing you want to do, delete this garbage and make a fill layer, right? And just choose a base color. This is going to be a kind of like fire holding brazier or torch thing. So I'm going to make it dark blue because that's what's in my head. Obviously, I can give you direction, I can give you reference, we can do all that fun stuff, but just for this example, I'm just going to go straight in. So I have a base color. Now I'm going to add another color on top, and this is going to be black. So I'm going to make a group and call this values. I'm going to put this black inside, and we're going to make several little layers of dark colors that are going to give us essentially the 3D details that we usually get in the material, but now we're going to have them just on base color. Now before I do that, I'm just going to go to my texture set settings and bake the mesh maps. And this is going to be a 512 because it's quite a small asset. And we're going to use the low poly as the high poly, and let's just do bake maps. Yep, that should be fine. Done. Okay, we're done. And the reason we do that is just because we want these to be here, because they're going to be used whilst we're creating these values. All right, let's go back to our base color. We have our little dark layer here. We're going to make it visible inside our values. Right-click that layer and add a black mask. Right-click that black mask and add a generator. And we're going to duplicate this 3 times, or 2 times. The bottom one we're going to call world space. The one above it we're going to call curvature. And the one above it we'll leave blank for now because we're not sure which one it's going to be. And make them all invisible except the bottom one. It's world space. Click on the generator, click the generator, and click world space right at the bottom. Now straight away this is going to do this. It's going to add it's going to make the color only visible based on a direction. Now we want to invert this direction because we want it to be coming from below, and then we want to change the balance so that it comes a bit more strongly. And we can increase or reduce the global contrast. Let's reduce it like that, something like this. Oh, that's very cool, but not what we're doing. Increase our contrast a little bit, and I wanted to get it going further up, but less. There we go. Right. That's kind of what we want. Something like that, right? And now you're like, okay, what did that do? Well, turn it on and off. It created drop shadows on the entire model based on the world space normal map, right? That's what it did. So something else you can add to this, which I'll do at the end. Yeah, I'll do that at the end. So let's carry on. We did our world space. Let's go to Curvature Generator, do the same, and click Curvature, right? And now this, let's see whether this actually works. Ooh, do we have a curvature? We do. It's not very strong though. Oh, and we have it invisible. Sorry. So let's turn that layer on, the dark layer, this one here. And let's turn on our curvature, right? And this is what we see. So we just clicked the same generator, and instead of world space, we chose curvature. And let's change our settings. I don't want to blur it. And here you can mess around with these. I'm never too sure how to use these ones, to be honest. No. Higher, medium, soft. Right. So now we have a kind of outline. Right? I have a kind of outline. We're going to go back and make this less strong in a bit. Oh, you can change the mode. What do the other modes do? Cavities, dual, and unprocessed. Oh dear. Let's do edges for now. All right, let's move on. Let's go to this top one that we have and click the generator. And this one, we're going to try two. First, we're going to try light, and then we're going to try ambient occlusion. And if neither of those give us what we want, we could also try position. So first, let's try light. So we can choose where this effect is going to come from. Now, this is actually supposed to be used for a bright effect, so I'm not going to use light yet. Let's try ambient occlusion and invert ambient occlusion. Increase our distance and our blur. Global contrast is lower. And what's our balance going to be like? Okay, and it blur it quite a lot. Yeah, there we go. And reduce the balance and blur it a lot. That might be a good tactic for that. There we go. So this is what that does. Now let's duplicate that once more just to see what our last one can do. And that's position. And I don't think we necessarily need position yet. Let's invert that. Well, to be honest, we could use it because it essentially gives you that bottom shadow, right? And we can just reduce the opacity a bit so it's not so strong. Because without it, it's just bright at the bottom, whereas now it's dark, so the top is exaggerated. And I know a lot of these are very strong at the moment. We will go through and work on them. Now, on top of that, let's add our light value, which we're going to leave as white just for the moment. Go to our black mask, add our generator, and do our light. Come on. And we choose where this is coming from. I want to make it come straight from above. Do I want to reduce the glossiness a bit? Highlight level. Leave the highlight level, light attenuation, make it a bit softer perhaps. And notice we're still in base color. We're not working in material mode. Let's go to our color and just make it something a little, I don't know, colored, sun colored, and reduce it greatly. We want something quite light. And let's go something towards purple, which is more what our game is geared towards. Bright purple. Let's see if we can make this work a little better. Do we have a blur here? We don't have a blur. Alright, we're gonna go through. Let me see if I can change it. Can I change it to overlay? Okay, we can change it to overlay and then reduce it by a lot. Like that. There we go, that's what we want. Very low overlay with very low overlay. And now we have a bit of a light, right? A bit better. Now let's go through and do some stuff. Let's turn them all invisible and we'll start from the bottom. And world space, I think world space is fine. There's not really anything I want to do to it. It's subtle enough. Curvature is quite strong. So I'm going to add a filter to it. And that filter, I'm going to give it a... First, let's try blur. I said I didn't like the blur. I don't like the blur. So let's not do a blur. Let's do a contrast. Increase the contrast and reduce the luminosity. And this is going to make it blend with whatever the color underneath is. On top of that, we can add a paint layer. We can go to our brushes, and we can grab an artistic brush. And now we can come in here and actually lower our flow quite low, it's something like 20 something, and then start painting out a lot of these very harsh edges that are just a little too strong. Just like that. And we're doing it quite lightly. We don't want to erase them completely. We still want there to be some there, right? And notice we're still on our base color. We're still just on our base color. Don't go too crazy. And up here we can probably do the same. Just a little bit of... I'm using a tablet. Don't do this with a mouse, you'll hate it. Okay. And literally just getting rid of some of this hardness that's everywhere. So it's not so strong and outlined. and it also gives it a little beat up look because I'm being quite light with my pen. I'm being very light with my pen. Right. And now when you look at it, let's see the before and after. So before that, it was like this, and now it's like this. So it's quite a bit more natural. Our next one was our ambient occlusion. Now this one we definitely need a filter. We need a contrast filter. Increase this and just reduce the luminosity quite a bit. And now you have this much more lighter, more subtle ambient occlusion occurring instead of like the super strong we were getting before. And our very top one, this was just a little bit of bottom lighting, bottom shadows, and this was our top color. And we could mess around with this a little bit if we think this is a bit too strong, like that. And it still gives us a bit of a difference, a bit of a nice effect. Now, we can close our values. These are our values, right? So we're still in base color. If I go to material, this is what we have. You don't really see the difference. Base color worked quite well for us. I think it will work quite well for us. Our inside is a bit light. We could do some work on that. But for now, I'm just going to leave it. And I'm going to go to this. I'm going to make a folder. I'm going to call it colors. I'm going to add my light color, my first color in there. I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm just going to change it a little bit. Maybe to something a little brighter. And then I'm going to give it a black mask. I'm going to grab paint. And I'm going to just come in here and just paint some highlights and some variation. Now, depending on how much of a plan you have, and you can notice that I have no plan whatsoever, you can create very specific effects. So if you want this to be meadow, you can try and create a more meadow-like effect. If you want it to be stone, you can focus on stone, right? Now, I want to just try one effect that I haven't actually used before. So using it live may not be the best idea, but it's this physical paint. So what happens, right? So physical paint creates these kind of natural thingies scattering around. Let's try and use a different, let's use artistic hair, see what that does. Nope, excuse me. I said I wanted one of these. Thank you. Interesting. Let's reduce the flow. Some flow jitter. Lower the hardness. And mess around with this physics thing. Okay, so that's going to create this effect now. Let's get rid of those things. What happens if we do this now? Okay, we get a bit more scratchy surface. So you can try using the physical brush to also give yourself some effects and some patterns. Now this is quite far away, so you don't need to worry too much about these highlights. Perhaps this is an interesting effect. I'm doing it just on the border, and most of the effect is staying on the border, but it's actually branching off into the center as well. So although the border is getting the most of it and getting highlighted, the middle is also having a slight effect. So let's give this a blur. Curious. Anyway, let's carry on with what we were doing initially. In here now you can just go for and start painting, essentially. So whatever you've has as your values, you can then come in here and just start painting. Whether you want to add separate colors, whether you want to add some of the initial materials that Luke has been making for us, you know, it's up to you. If you're a hand painter, you can start hand painting, so you can just add a normal layer and you can go for it and you can start doing your usual hand painting. I like to actually just use lighter colors with black masks and a pen and just going in and manually painting whatever it is that I'm doing. Right, so the main thing in this tutorial was pretty much using the values to give yourself a starting point to work on top of the model with base color. Do something like this as well. Let's do something like that. And we don't want it to affect the other areas very much, so we're going to grab the selection tool, bring it to 0, and just select these bits that we don't want affected, and these top bits that we don't want affected as well. Rest seems to be alright. And now we can come in here and add a blur. Filter, blur. We can blur that. And from far away, it's starting to get a bit of an effect. Something you can do to make your previews a bit easier, you can go to window, or excuse me, settings. You can grab this background color and just increase it to something quite brighter and bluer. And now you can put your model higher up and you can preview kind of how it would look on a snowy surface, for example. Now in here on the inside, I want to add something a bit darker. So I'm going to go something dark purple, add our black mask, and grab our paint. And I'm just going to just outline it like this. All right, and then I'm going to do the same thing, just give it a blur. Something like that. And reduce the opacity a bit as well, so it fits. But I also want this whole bit to be a bit darker, so I'm going to duplicate that, change the color slightly, something a bit darker, and then on here I'm just going to add a black mask, so I overwrite that, give it a paint, and then grab this selection tool, and I'm just going to grab everything that's here. And actually I think I can just go to my 2D view, and I can just grab the whole UV shell, like that. There, that's much easier, instead of playing around. And now let's grab, yeah, and you can see how it's darker. And we could also potentially do it on these bits as well. And probably these bits, because they're shadowed. In fact, I don't even know if these bottom bits will need it, because they're pointing upwards, are they not? They are. It is difficult to see, is it not? I guess I could have carried on in the 2D view. Yeah, 2D view is easier. Use the 2D view, guys, for stuff like this. Don't need to mess around. Let's go back to our 3D and just give this a quick blur. We should be all right. Now you never see that bottom part, so maybe that was too much effort for something that we don't need, but leaving it for now. I'm gonna come back here actually, and I remember I added this to the top. I want to add another paint to this and select these bottom areas. I don't even know if it's already there. It might already be there. Yeah, I think it's already, yeah, it's already there. So we just want to make it stronger there, don't we? So let's do that in our color instead. This one was that middle one, that middle very dark one, wasn't it? So let's carry on this very dark one. Let's add a paint to it. And do something like that. And move that paint below the blur so that it copies the effect. We're essentially painting in additional ambient occlusion, right? Do this on the bottom as well if you wish to really go for it. Might be too much there on the bottom. Anyway, and I think I'm gonna use this as well. I'm gonna add another paint to this below it and paint in a bit below the blur. Make it a bit smaller. Like that. You get kind of a bit of a cooler effect. We could also put a bit on the sides here and create our own details. Now you might notice the curvature is poking through quite a significant amount. I'm not too concerned. Not too concerned because we're following a bit of a comic style, which and comic styles use quite heavy inks, heavy dark colors, and it will stand out better from a distance, right? Because otherwise, if we didn't have the values, it would be If we didn't have the values, it would just be too bright, and either an eyesore or get lost in the other stuff, right? We don't want that. And I think at the top, I just need to make this a bit less shoddy at the top. I think let's add one final color. And add a black mask, add a paint, and I would just go in here and make our paint bigger. And let's put this in a group as well and make that group have a black mask and have it so that that only affects this here. So now this is inside the group and our paint will only ever go on here. It will never go here, right? And let's change our color to be something less terrible. I was gonna swear there. And let's just, you know, do some actual artistic mark making instead of being so regimented. Right. You can switch your thingy. Can reduce opacity a bit. We have a bit of variation to the top there. If you want to add a little detail, you could go something very dark and just give it a black mask. Let's put it on the top. And let's just take something quite small, something like a basic hard brush, make it quite small, and you can just paint in. That's a bit too small, isn't it? Paint in some specks, and we could then, let's change them so they're a bit less terrible. Should it be brighter or should it be darker? Let's do darker. Can reduce the opacity, and now I'm going to try something I haven't tried before. I'm going to add to this color a filter, and I'm going to add a bevel, and I don't know what that's going to do. No, it didn't do what I thought. Alright, let's try another one. Let's try... This is a filter, excuse me. Let's add a generator. Add a light. And then we can try and point this in a certain direction. Nope. Okay, last try. And then I'm leaving it. Last try. Last try. I'm shooting in the dark. I'm shooting in the dark. Never mind. We'll leave that. We'll leave that and leave it. I was gonna say that you could come in, but I think the only way to do what I wanted to do was come back in with another darker brush and then paint in with a darker brush if you wanted to do details like that, which is a little annoying. There should be a better way to do that, and I might do some research and find if there is a better way to do that, and so that we can make more easily make like tiny details on top of assets like that. So I'm going to skip those parts. But yeah, so this is, you know, following a method similar to this, we might be able to texture things quite quickly. Do they need further refinement? Possibly. But for now, I think it works quite well. Probably one last thing I will say is you can add emissive to models like this. So if we add an emissive map, there we go, and we go back to our paint and we go to our colors and we'll just add another thing and call this fire, and let's change everything to just color and emissive. We'll change our emissive to something bright red, change our base color to something orange, give ourselves a black mask, and see whether we can do something interesting with this. So we're essentially painting in the lighting information that fire would create and creating a bit of a glow. All right. Again, I'm not being super careful at the moment, but that's what you get. It looks like Cheetos at the moment, I'm aware. Okay, now let's see if we can do something with this. First, let's see why our emissive is so weak. Let's go to Window, Shader Settings, Emissive Strength, Emissive Intensity. Let's increase that. That's not changing anything. Oh, we're on freaking material, weren't we? Oh my god. This is what happens when you increase emissive intensity. Let's go back to our shader settings and put that back down like it should be. So let's look at it in this view just for emissive, because we can mix emissive with our color in in Unity. So for this, we can look at it like this. Let's add a filter to that and just blur it a bunch, right? So we can create hot looking things. Let me see if I can adjust the color to something that is a little closer to what I'm looking for. Alright, so let's make this just bright yellow then. There we go. And then let's come back in here and I should have added a paint. Oops. Let's delete some of this stuff. Right, so you can use a method like this to create very hot iron, it seems, but also, man, I can't get rid of that. Let's look at our 2D and change our brush to UV, right? But you can have some cool effects, whether it's fire or heated metal or whatever it be. We can do some cool stuff. I don't know why it's glitched out on the corners here though, I'm afraid. Just don't know. Okay. Kind of cool. Kind of cool. Blur is a bit strong, but creates an interesting effect. What if we lower the opacity as well? It's not lowering the opacity of the emissive, which is interesting. Oh, that's the opacity of the blur. Excuse me. Let's lower this opacity. It doesn't lower the opacity of the blur. How interesting. Of the emissive. Anyway. In base color, you don't really see it. Oh, gosh. Oh, because I made it green. Interesting. Green light. So that still gives us an interesting effect, even though we don't see the emissive in the thingy. I guess what you could do is you could just overlay this with a red. And you could reduce the blur on the red. Or increase it. Maybe not. Anyway. I'll stop there. That looked kind of cool. Thanks for watching. I hope this was useful in some way. Apologies if there was a bit of a ramble. You can see what the time is. Have a nice evening. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.